traveler on the journey into the depths of the psyche. Have you ever lain down after a long day, your body utterly exhausted, yet your mind erupting like a river in flood? Old fragments of memory, anxious premonitions, and nameless thoughts quietly take over the night, drawing you into a state of mindlessness, too tired to remain fully awake, yet too restless to surrender to sleep. Sometimes, the most exhausting thing is not what happens to us, but the way the ego must endlessly interpret the world. Carl Jung once reminded us that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The exhaustion you are carrying is the result of the ego tirelessly hauling stones that do not belong to it, the weight of unintegrated memories and distorted perceptions of reality. Hello, I am Milo, and tonight I will accompany you on a journey into the depths of the mind. This video is not merely a guide into sleep. It is a sanctuary of stillness. I promise to guide you as you clean the glass of the lighthouse of awareness, helping you recognize your true face, the authentic self that has always been whole beneath every social mask and every fragmented stream of thought. Take a deep breath and set the raft of thinking down. You are the vast sky, not the dark clouds of anxiety. Let this journey bring you back home where absolute rest is already waiting. You are enough, and you have always been enough. The ego, the fragile core of waking experience. The journey into the depths of the human mind, according to Carl Gustav Jung, always begins at a point so familiar that we often mistake it for our entire being, the ego. It is the center of consciousness, the voice that says, "This is who I am," the narrator that continuously tells the story of your life from one day to the next. Through the ego, you wake each morning with the familiar sense that you are still yourself, that the world retains its order, and that life continues according to a logic that feels, at least on the surface, graspable. Jung did not deny the essential role of the ego. On the contrary, he regarded it as a great achievement of psychological evolution. Without the ego, there would be no consciousness, no capacity to think, to choose, or to take responsibility for one's actions. The ego allows you to locate yourself in time and space. It enables you to say, "This is my thought. This is my memory. This is my pain." But the problem begins when the ego assumes that it is the whole person. Jung warned that modern human beings live within a dangerous illusion. The illusion that what we are conscious of is all that exists within the psyche. In 2 essays on analytical psychology, he famously wrote, "The ego is not the whole of the psyche, but only a complex among other complexes. The ego is not the entirety of the psyche. It is merely a complex, albeit a central one, among countless other complexes that live, move, and exert influence within you. One of Jung's most enduring metaphors is that of a small island. Consciousness and the ego at its center is like an island floating on the surface of the sea. On this island, everything appears bright, clearly bounded, named, and ordered. Yet beneath it lies the vast, deep, and vital ocean of the unconscious. If you spend your entire life living only on that island, you will gradually become exhausted, not because the sea is too violent, but because you have cut yourself off from your own source of life. The irony is this: the stronger the ego becomes, the more easily a person grows weary. This is because the ego is built upon control. It wants to understand, to grasp, to predict, and to manage. It seeks clear answers to everything. Who am I? Who should I become? Where am I going? Am I doing the right thing? Yet the psyche, according to Jung, does not operate according to the ego's linear logic. It moves through symbols, images, paradoxes, and unpredictable currents, in the archetypes and the collective. Unconscious. Jung wrote, "Consciousness is like the surface of a deep sea. Beneath it lie the life-giving forces of the unconscious. Consciousness is only the surface, and the ego, no matter how important, stands only upon that surface. When the ego believes it must carry the entire psychological life on its own, it falls into a state of chronic tension. This is why many people feel exhausted even when they are doing nothing. It is not because the body is weak, but because the ego is attempting to perform a task far beyond its natural capacity. Jung referred to this phenomenon as ego inflation, the swelling of the ego. When the ego becomes inflated, a person believes that everything depends on personal will, that with enough effort, enough control, and enough correctness, peace will be achieved. Yet herein lies the paradox. The more one tries to control the psyche, the more the psyche resists. In Psychological Types, Jung observed, man cannot stand a meaningless life. The ego longs for meaning, yet it tries to manufacture meaning within frameworks that are too narrow. When life exceeds those frameworks through loss, crisis, exhaustion, or emptiness, the ego feels threatened. And at that moment, instead of listening, it often reacts with anxiety, panic, or collapse. Here, Jung does not invite us to destroy the ego. He does not advocate the naive or extreme abandonment of the self. What he proposes is far more subtle, placing the ego in its rightful position, not as a ruler, but as a coordinator, not as the absolute center, but as a gateway into a far larger inner world. In Ion, Jung wrote a foundational statement: the ego is the subject of all personal acts of consciousness, but it is not identical with the whole personality. The ego is the subject of personal consciousness, but it is not identical with the whole personality. When this is understood, a subtle yet profound shift occurs. You no longer have to force yourself to be always alert, always strong, or always certain of what you are doing. You begin to allow pauses, ambiguity, and unclear movements to exist without immediately explaining or correcting them. The ego, at that point, is allowed to rest. And within that rest, another form of awareness begins to emerge, an awareness not rooted in control, but in listening. For Jung, sleep is not the collapse of consciousness, but the lowering of the ego's authority, so that deeper layers of the psyche may find their voice. When the ego ceases to act as a tyrannical commander, the mind begins to regulate itself, heal itself, and reorganize itself according to older, wiser laws. And perhaps this is Jung's most profound motivational message. You do not need to become a stronger ego in order to live more fully. You need only an ego that is more humble, stable enough to stand still, and trusting enough to yield to something greater than itself. When night falls and the outer world grows quiet, this is not the moment when you lose yourself. It is the moment when the ego is permitted to step back so that the truer, broader, and deeper human being may begin its own way of awakening. The two layers of the unconscious, treasury and inheritance. When the ego begins to step back, not in defeat, but in humility, another door slowly opens. This is the moment when a person realizes that consciousness, however sharp and necessary, is not the sole center of psychological life. Behind clear thoughts, beneath memories, we can name there exists a far vaster world, quieter, yet more alive and more powerful, the unconscious. Jung often compared consciousness to a small island rising from the middle of the ocean. This island is where the ego resides, where there is light, boundary, and language. Yet it is the surrounding ocean, deep, dark, and immeasurable, that sustains the island's very existence. Without the unconscious ocean, consciousness would have no foundation, no energy, and would eventually dry up. In the structure and dynamics of the psyche, Jung wrote, "The unconscious is not a mere receptacle of forgotten memories, but a living, dynamic system. The unconscious is not a passive warehouse of what has been forgotten. It is a living system, constantly moving, constantly responding, constantly seeking to rebalance consciousness when consciousness goes too far. Crucially, Jung did not speak of a single unconscious. He clearly distinguished between two layers, the personal unconscious and the collective unconscious. This distinction is not merely academic. It fundamentally changes how human beings understand themselves. The personal unconscious is the layer closest to consciousness. It is formed from your own individual life, forgotten memories, experiences that were never fully digested, emotions once deemed unacceptable, and thoughts pushed out of the ego's light. Jung referred to these contents as repressed or forgotten, but never as erased. In 2 essays on analytical psychology, he wrote, "Everything of which I know, but of which I am not at the moment thinking everything of which I was once conscious, but have now forgotten everything, perceived by my senses, but not noted by my conscious mind. All this is content of the unconscious." In other words, the personal unconscious is living memory, not dead memory. What you do not remember is still remembering you. What you do not name is still whispering. And for this reason, many of your emotional reactions, a sadness without clear cause, an invisible fear, or a strange attraction, do not arise from the present moment, but from layers of memory that have not yet been made conscious. But if the personal unconscious were only an individual story, Jung would not have stopped there. His most revolutionary discovery lay even deeper in a layer no personal experience alone can fully explain: the collective unconscious. In the archetypes and the collective unconscious, Jung offered his classic definition. The collective unconscious is a part of the psyche, which can be negatively distinguished from a personal unconscious by the fact that it does not owe its existence to personal experience. The collective unconscious is not created by personal experience. It is the psychological inheritance of all humanity, accumulated over thousands of years of evolution. If the personal unconscious is like the diary of one lifetime, the collective unconscious is like the memory of the entire human species. In this deepest layer, Jung discovered archetypes, not concrete images, but primordial patterns of experience. The mother, the father, the shadow, the hero, the wanderer, death, and rebirth. These motifs appear in dreams, myths, religions, and art across all cultures, even where no direct contact has ever existed. Jung emphasized, the archetype is a tendency to form such representations of a motif, representations that can vary a great deal in detail without losing their basic pattern. An archetype is not a fixed image, but a tendency to generate images. They are like underground rivers, shaping how human beings feel, react, and create meaning in the world, even when the ego is completely unaware of their presence. This perspective offers a very different kind of motivation from modern thinking. You are not merely the product of your childhood. You are not only the result of what has happened in your personal life. You are also the inheritor of an ancient intelligence, one that has lived, loved, feared, and dreamed long before you were born. In Memories, Dreams, Reflections, Jung wrote, "In each of us there is another whom we do not know. The being within you is not only the wounded child of your own past, but also a bearer of humanity's memory. And for this reason, you sometimes feel things that cannot be explained by personal reason alone. A nameless sadness, a strange familiarity with symbols you never learned, or a deep resonance with ancient stories. When night falls and the ego grows tired, the boundaries between layers of the psyche become thinner. The personal unconscious begins to surface through fragments of memory, while the collective unconscious speaks through symbols and dreams. This is not chaos, but a natural effort of the psyche to rebalance itself. Jung once offered a statement that is both a warning and a promise. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The unconscious, when ignored, governs you from the shadows, but when listened to it, becomes the deepest source of guidance. And perhaps this is the gentle invitation at the heart of the Jungian journey, not to conquer the unconscious, but to descend into that ocean with respect. Not to control it, but to realize that you have never been alone within your own psyche. You carry within you an entire treasury of memory and a living inheritance of humanity that continues to breathe through you, even in the deepest sleep. The nature of perception. The world as a flow of images. When a person begins to accept that beneath waking consciousness lies a vast ocean of the unconscious, one that carries not only personal memory, but also the psychological inheritance of humanity. A new and more subtle question gradually arises. If the psyche is so deep, is the world we see each day truly objective? Carl Gustav Jung did not pose this question as an abstract philosopher. He approached it as a clinician, someone who listened to thousands of dreams, visions, memories, and symbols. And his answer unsettles the very foundations of modern thinking. We never encounter the material world directly. What we experience is not reality in itself, but psychic images generated by the nervous system and the psyche. In Psychological Types, Jung wrote a pivotal sentence: What we call reality is in fact a psychic image. Reality as we know it is a psychic image. This does not mean that the external world does not exist. Jung did not deny material reality. Rather, he insisted that every experience of the world must pass through the psyche. Light must become neural signals. Sound must become interpreted vibrations. Events must be placed within an inner framework of meaning. And in that process, reality is filtered, bent, and sometimes distorted, not through malice, but through the natural structure of human perception. Perception, in Jung's view, is not a mirror faithfully reflecting the world. It is more like a river of images flowing through the varied landscapes of the psyche: memory, emotion, archetype, fear, and hope. The same event can give rise to entirely different worlds for two people, because each is seeing through a different inner structure. In the structure and dynamics of the psyche, Jung wrote, "The psyche creates reality every day. The psyche creates reality every day." This idea is both liberating and unsettling. Liberating, because it suggests that you are not entirely determined by external circumstances. Unsettling, because it forces you to confront the truth that you are participating in the creation of your lived experience, whether you are aware of it or not. When the ego believes, "I am simply seeing the world as it is deceiving itself. In truth, the ego sees the world only as the psyche allows it to see. What remains unacknowledged in the unconscious returns as distorted perception. An unrecognized fear can turn the world into a place of threat. An old wound can color every relationship with suspicion. And an activated archetype can cause an ordinary person to suddenly appear as a savior or an enemy in your eyes. Jung once observed, projection changes the world into the replica of one's own unknown face. Projection turns the world into a mirror of the inner face you have not yet recognized. Perception, in the Jungian light, is the living boundary where consciousness and the unconscious meet. It is the dynamic frontier where unconscious images are projected onto the outer world, transforming reality into a vast screen reflecting the state of the psyche. When you are unaware of this, you believe that the world is hurting me. When awareness begins to emerge, a different question appears. What within me is seeking to be seen? This becomes especially clear in dreams. In dreams, you do not doubt that the world is created by your own mind. Jung suggested that waking life is not fundamentally different, only different in degree. When the ego is alert, it believes perception to be objective. When the ego grows tired, as it does at night, the layer of control thins, and the world begins to be experienced as a stream of symbolic images. In memories, Dreams Reflections. Jung wrote, "The dream shows the inner truth and reality of the dreamer as it really is. Dreams reveal inner truth." But what Jung implicitly suggests is that daytime perception does the same, only in a subtler form. Here, Jungian philosophy becomes a profound source of motivation. If the reality you live in is partly shaped by your perceptual structure, then transforming your life is not only about changing circumstances, but about changing your relationship to your inner world. Not by forcing positive thinking, but by becoming aware of the images operating beneath consciousness. Jung did not advise people to escape reality. He urged them to go deeper into it. For reality, when viewed through Jungian awareness, is no longer a cold mass of material facts, but an ongoing dialogue between psyche and world. In Modern Man in Search of a Soul, Jung wrote, "The world exists not merely as it is, but as it is experienced by us. The world exists not only as it is, but as it is experienced by us. When night falls and you close your eyes, the flow of images does not stop. It simply changes direction. From the outer world, it flows inward. Daytime images blend with memory archetype and emotion, forming another reality, no less real, in which the psyche continues to live, to speak, and to regulate itself. And perhaps in that stillness, a new awareness emerges. You do not need to believe everything you see, not because the world is false, but because perception always carries the fingerprint of your psyche. When you realize this, you begin to live more lightly, more deeply, and more freely, not by controlling images, but by listening to their source. This is the next step in the Jungian journey, from recognizing the unconscious to understanding that the world you inhabit is a silent conversation between your psyche and the universe. A conversation that continues even as you slowly drift into sleep. The 4 orienting functions, the compass of the psyche. When we begin to understand that reality does not reach us as a raw objective mass, but as a flow of images shaped by the psyche, another essential question arises. How does the mind orient itself within that flow? If perception is not a passive reflection, then there must be inner principles quietly guiding us. Principles that allow human beings to differentiate, choose, and create meaning in the world they inhabit. Carl Gustav Jung called these principles the 4 orienting functions of consciousness. They are not learned talents or acquired skills, but fundamental ways in which the human psyche approaches reality. In Psychological Types, Jung wrote, "The 4 orienting functions of consciousness are thinking, feeling sensation, and intuition. These 4 functions operate like an inner compass. They do not tell you where you must go, but they reveal where you are standing in relation to the world. And more importantly, each person tends to rely on one direction of this compass more than the others. Sensation is the function that establishes what is present. It answers the question, what is here? The world of sensation is the world of detail, form, sound, smell, texture, weight. Those with a strongly developed sensation function tend to live close to material reality, to what is. They are less drawn into speculation and often possess a natural groundedness in everyday life. Yet Jung emphasized that sensation is not absolute truth. It is only one way of approaching reality. In Psychological Types, he noted sensation establishes what is actually given. Sensation establishes what is given, but what is given always passes through the nervous system and the psychological context of the perceiver. Strong sensation can bring stability, but when absolutized, it can also trap a person in the present moment, blinding them to deeper layers and hidden possibilities beneath the surface. Thinking is the function that seeks to determine what something is. It classifies, compares, and connects through logic. Thinking gives structure to perception, allowing human beings to understand the world through concepts and cause and effect relationships. Jung described it as follows. Thinking is that psychological function which, in accordance with its own laws, brings given presentations into conceptual connection. Thinking connects perceptual images into meaning. But like sensation, it represents only half of the picture. When thinking dominates a person, may understand everything very clearly, yet fail to feel its living value. The world becomes a system to be explained, rather than a reality to be lived. Opposite thinking stands, feeling the function that evaluates value. Jung emphasized that feeling is not impulsive emotion, but a mode of judgment. It answers the question, what does this end to me? In Psychological Types, he wrote, feeling is a rational function, just as much as thinking. Feeling is rational, not in the sense of logic, but in the sense of value. Those with a well-developed feeling function are often sensitive to relationships, to what harms or nourishes life. They perceive the ethical and human tones of the world. However, when feeling holds absolute dominance, the world can become overly personal, where everything is measured in terms of like and dislike, love and aversion, without sufficient differentiation. Jung did not advise choosing thinking or feeling, but learning to let them enter into dialogue. And then there is intuition, the most mysterious of the four functions, and the one to which Jung devoted profound reflection. Intuition perceives latent possibilities, what may become, rather than only what is. Jung defined it simply. Intuition is perception via the unconscious. Intuition is perception through the unconscious. It resembles a flash, a hunch, a form of knowing that cannot be explained through ordinary reasoning. Those who live primarily through intuition often sense the direction of events before they manifest. Yet they may also become lost in visions that lack grounding in reality. The core of Jungian thought does not lie in choosing which function is best, but in recognizing that each person possesses a unique psychological configuration, a dominant function, an auxiliary function, and neglected ones. Jung warned that these neglected functions, especially the inferior function, often become the source of inner conflict and psychological exhaustion. In Psychological Types, he wrote, "The inferior function is practically identical with the unconscious. The inferior function is nearly identical with the unconscious." This means that the place where you are weakest is also where the unconscious speaks most readily. And when you attempt to live using only one direction of the compass, the psyche will seek compensation, sometimes through crisis, sometimes through dreams, sometimes through a nameless sense of disorientation. Here, Jung's motivational message becomes particularly subtle. You do not need to force yourself into becoming an all-capable person who uses all four functions perfectly. What you need is awareness of which direction you rely on too heavily and a willingness to respect the others. When the inner compass is used more evenly, perception softens and life becomes less harsh toward yourself. When night falls, the orienting functions also shift their roles. Sensation recedes, thinking slows, feeling deepens, and intuition is freed to speak in images. Sleep, according to Jung, is the time when the compass is recalibrated, not so that you may control better, but so that you may orient yourself more humanely. And perhaps this is the deeper meaning of the four orienting functions. They do not exist so that you may master the world, but so that you may live in harmony with the structure of your own psyche. When you understand this compass, you no longer fear the differences of others, nor do you judge your own limitations so harshly. You begin to walk more slowly, yet more steadily, not because you know every path, but because you have learned to listen to the psyche's natural direction. Personal memory, the library of what has been lost. When we begin to recognize that the mind orients the world through four different functions: sensation, thinking, feeling, and intuition, a quiet yet profound truth gradually reveals itself. Not every experience is fully processed at the moment it occurs. Whatever is not adequately received by any function does not disappear. It withdraws from consciousness, slips into deeper layers of the psyche, and continues to live there like books that were never destroyed, only no longer placed on a visible shelf. Jung called this storage space the personal unconscious. If consciousness is like a reading desk where the ego works, then the personal unconscious is the library behind it, where every experience that has ever passed through your life is archived, whether you remember it or not. In the structure and dynamics of the psyche, Jung wrote, "The personal unconscious contains lost memories, painful ideas that have been repressed, subliminal perceptions, and experiences that were never consciously assimilated." The personal unconscious contains lost memories, painful ideas that were repressed, faint perceptions, and experiences that were never consciously digested. This runs counter to the common belief that forgetting is the end of it. For Jung, no experience truly disappears. What is forgotten merely shifts into another mode of existence, quieter, yet no less powerful. It influences you, not through words, but through emotions, immediate reactions, inexplicable preferences, or recurring patterns in life. You may not remember the first time you felt abandoned, but your body remembers. You may not recall the moment you learned to stay silent in order to be accepted, yet your psyche continues to reenact that script in adult relationships. Jung called these clusters of memory and emotion complexes, and he emphasized, complexes are feeling-toned ideas that have a certain autonomy. Complexes are ideas charged with emotion and possessing a degree of autonomy. In other words, personal memories are not merely static images of the past. They are living entities carrying energy, tending to react, and at times capable of taking control of your behavior without the ego's awareness. When you respond too strongly to a minor situation, when you feel inexplicably drawn to the same kinds of people again and again, it is likely that an old book in the unconscious library has just been opened. Jung did not view this as pathology. He regarded it as the natural condition of the psyche. The problem is not that we have unconscious memories, but that we do not know they are operating. In 2 essays on analytical psychology, he wrote a line that became foundational to analytical psychology. Everything that is unconscious in ourselves, we discover in our neighbor. Everything unconscious in us is discovered in others. When personal memory is not made conscious, it does not remain still. It seeks projection into the world, turning other people and circumstances into carriers of an unrecognized past. Here, Jung offers a very different motivational perspective from the modern injunction. to forget the past and move on. He did not advise forgetting. He advised returning and reading, not to drown in suffering, but to reclaim the energy trapped in old pages. And sleep plays a central role in this process. When the ego is alert, it selects discards and prioritizes whatever serves adaptation to the outer world. But when night falls and the ego's control softens, the unconscious library begins to open. Jung observed that in dreams, unresolved memories have a chance to return in symbolic form, not to hurt us, but to be integrated. In memories, dreams, reflections. Jung wrote, "Dreams are the direct expression of unconscious psychic activity. Dreams are the direct expression of unconscious psychic activity." But this is also true of the vague sensations before sleep, of fleeting images of emotions without clear cause that arise in the dark. This is the moment when consciousness loosens its grip and the personal unconscious begins to whisper what was once forgotten. From a Jungian perspective, the deep fatigue many people feel at night is not merely physical exhaustion. It is the weariness of a library that has never been organized. Stacked books, unfinished stories, memories that were never placed in their proper context. All of these consume psychological energy, even when you are unaware of them. Jung emphasized that the goal is not to remember every detail of the past, but to establish a conscious relationship with the personal unconscious. When you allow memories to exist, to be seen, and to be placed within a broader context of life, they lose their invisible power. In the archetypes and the collective unconscious, Jung wrote, "The unconscious can make a fool of you in no time. But once it is recognized, it becomes a source of strength. The unconscious can rule you when it goes unrecognized. But once acknowledged, it becomes a source of strength. It is here that personal memory transforms from burden into resource. What once wounded you becomes depth. What was buried becomes understanding. What once drove blind reactions becomes conscious choice. When you lie down, close your eyes and allow the mind to slow. You are not losing control. You are allowing an older wisdom within you to take over a wisdom that knows how to reread old pages without being overwhelmed by them. Sleep in the Jungian spirit is not forgetting, but a deeper form of remembering. And perhaps this is the gentlest invitation of the entire journey. You do not need to run from the past in order to find peace. You need only enter your inner library with light soft enough to realize that what has been lost never truly left you. It has simply been waiting to be read again, so that at last it may be laid down completely. Cryptomnesia. When memory is reborn as idea, when we have entered the library of the personal unconscious and recognized that no experience ever truly disappears, something more subtle begins to reveal itself. The old books in that library do not simply lie still waiting to be reread. They shift, reorganize themselves, and at times, at the most unexpected moments, are reborn in an entirely new form. It is precisely at this point of intersection that Jung identified a strange phenomenon, both familiar and unsettling to the conscious ego: cryptomnesia. Cryptomnesia is the phenomenon in which a forgotten memory rises back into consciousness, but is no longer recognized as memory. It appears as a fresh idea, a creative discovery, a sudden intuition, leading the ego to believe that it has just created something out of nothing. But Jung insisted that within the psyche, nothingness does not exist. Every psychic content has its history. In psychiatric studies, Jung described this phenomenon with clarity. Cryptomnesia is the reappearance of a memory without the subject knowing that it is a memory. This insight shakes a deeply held belief of modern humanity, the belief that creativity is the production of something entirely new. For Jung, creativity is not creation out of the void, but a reconfiguration of unconscious contents that already exist. Whatever has once been read, heard, or felt even fleetingly can sink into the unconscious, waiting for the right moment to return. That return does not follow the logic of the ego. It does not ask permission. It gives no warning. It emerges like a flash, a hunch, a brilliant idea that surprises even ourselves. And because the ego does not remember its origin, it labels the experience as genius, pure intuition, or revelation. Jung did not deny the value of such moments, but he warned against the ego's naivete when it believes itself to be the sole author of the ideas that arise within the mind. In Psychological Types, Jung wrote, "The unconscious can produce contents that are far superior to the conscious mind. The unconscious can produce contents that far exceed the capacities of consciousness. But produce here does not mean creating from nothing. It is the result of a long fermentation process in which memory, emotion, image, and archetype mingle, transform, and reorganize." Cryptomnesia reveals that the personal unconscious is not merely a storage place for the past, but the psyche's silent, creative workshop. Memories that were never fully integrated into consciousness live a life of their own. They wait for the right conditions, a particular emotional state, a moment of ego exhaustion, or a state of stillness to return in a new form. Jung observed that cryptomnesia often appears when the ego loosens its control, when a person is overly fatigued, highly stressed, or conversely deeply relaxed, as in dreams, meditative states, or just before falling asleep, the boundary between consciousness and the unconscious becomes thin. Buried contents find an opening through which to rise. In Memories, Dreams, Reflections, Jung wrote, "Creative ideas come from the unconscious. Creative ideas come from the unconscious." Yet Jung never romanticized this insight in a simplistic or mystical way. He understood that because the unconscious does not obey linear time, an old memory can appear as something new. For the unconscious, an image from childhood and a book read 30 years ago are both still alive in the present. Here, cryptomnesia becomes a deeply motivating lesson. You are not as empty as you think. When you feel depleted, directionless, or as though you have nothing left to give, you may be judging yourself from the narrow perspective of the ego. Beneath that perspective, the unconscious is still at work, quietly connecting fragments of memory you believe you have forgotten. But Jung also warned of the shadow side of cryptomnesia. When the ego fails to recognize the unconscious origin of its ideas, it is easily drawn into self-inflation. A person may believe themselves chosen, enlightened, or in possession of an absolute truth, when in reality, they are being driven by a memory complex. In the archetypes and the collective, unconscious, Jung wrote, "The unconscious has a dangerous side. It can overwhelm consciousness. The unconscious has a dangerous side. It can overwhelm consciousness." For this reason, Jung did not encourage people to worship every idea that arises within the mind. He advocated a dialogical relationship between the ego and the unconscious one, in which the ego learns to listen, but does not surrender entirely. When cryptomnesia is recognized, it does not diminish creativity. It deepens it. When you understand that your ideas are the outcome of a long inner history, you become more humble toward yourself. You no longer carry the burden of having to be constantly original. You allow the psyche to chew over, digest, and rebirth what already exists. This is especially important in relation to sleep. When you lie down, consciousness releases its supervisory role, and the unconscious is free to reorganize the library of memory. Fragments that once seemed disconnected begin to find one another. Old images merge into dreams, and sometimes a new idea begins to germinate, not so that you must wake and act immediately, but so that the psyche can continue its processes of self-healing and creation. Jung once offered a statement of profound orientation. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. One does not become enlightened by imagining light, but by making the darkness conscious. Cryptomnesia is one of the ways that darkness speaks not to deceive you, but to remind you that you are the product of far more layers of memory than you imagine. And perhaps the gentlest message of cryptomnesia is this: you do not need to force creativity, nor do you need to hunt for ideas. Simply create space for the psyche to rest, and what needs to return will find its way. Forgotten memories will not come back as burdens, but as creative sources, waiting to be reborn quietly, naturally, and in their own time. Libido, the flow of living energy. When we begin to understand that new ideas are sometimes memories finding their way back into life, a deeper question immediately arises. What allows memory not only to exist, but to move, to transform, and to rise again? What makes the unconscious not a static treasury, but a living ecosystem, one that continually seeks balance, creativity, and healing? Carl Gustav Jung's answer lies in a central concept that once stirred great controversy and also marked his departure from Freud libido. Unlike Freud's narrower interpretation, Jung did not regard libido as merely sexual energy. For him, libido was the total life energy of the psyche, the driving force behind all psychological movement, creative desire, the longing for meaning, spiritual impulses, and intellectual or religious quests. In Symbols of Transformation, Jung wrote, "Libido is intended simply as a name for the energy of the psyche." Libido is simply a name for the energy of the psyche. With this definition, Jung expanded libido beyond a limited biological frame and placed it at the center of the entire inner life. Libido is what prevents memory from lying dormant, what allows cryptomnesia to occur, what keeps the unconscious constantly restructuring itself. It is a flow, not a static reserve. And like all flows in nature, libido does not disappear when we rest. It only changes direction. Jung called this movement regression. But it must be emphasized, for Jung, regression does not mean decline or pathology. It is a natural movement of psychological energy when attention withdraws from the external world and turns inward. In 2 essays on analytical psychology, he wrote, "Regression is not necessarily a pathological phenomenon. It is a normal reaction to the withdrawal of energy from the external world." Regression is not necessarily pathological. It is a normal response when energy withdraws from the outer world. During the day, libido flows primarily outward into work relationships, responsibilities, and goals. The ego acts as coordinator, directing that energy toward adaptation to reality. But when night falls, when the body grows tired, and consciousness can no longer sustain constant control, libido naturally turns inward. Not because you are weakening, but because the psyche needs to replenish itself. Here, sleep is no longer a shutdown, but a living process of life energy. Libido, no longer steered by the ego, begins to pour energy into the unconscious, into memories that have not yet been integrated into complexes that require adjustment, into images that must be transformed through dreams. Jung described this process as a return to deeper sources of psychological life. In The Structure and Dynamics of the Psyche, he wrote, "The psyche is a self-regulating system. The psyche is a self-regulating system. Libido is the mechanism through which that self-regulation operates. When consciousness moves too far in one direction, energy seeks to return inward to restore balance. And when the ego resists this movement by forcing itself to remain constantly alert, efficient, and in control, fatigue accumulates not only in the body, but within the very flow of living energy." Here, Jung offers a motivational message radically different from modern culture. He did not advise you to increase energy through effort. He advised you to listen to the direction in which energy is flowing. Sometimes, what you need is not to do more, but to allow libido to regress so it can perform restorative work that consciousness cannot do. Jung warned that when regression is blocked for too long, libido will seek distorted outlets. It may manifest as unexplained anxiety, depression, loss of motivation, or compulsive behaviors. But when regression is accepted, it becomes a source of creativity and healing. In Modern Man, In Search of a Soul, Jung wrote, "The energy of the psyche is a vital force which can be diverted, dammed up, or transformed. The energy of the psyche is a vital force that can be redirected, blocked, or transformed. Sleep in the Jungian spirit is precisely the space of transformation. It is where libido no longer serves surface goals, but is allowed to nourish deeper layers of the human being. This helps us understand why many creative insights, moments of clarity, and important decisions often arise after rest rather than during tension. Not because you thought something through in your sleep, but because libido had time to reorganize your psychological energy." Jung once remarked with striking directness, "No psychic value can disappear without being replaced by another of equivalent intensity. No psychic value ever disappears without being replaced by another of equal intensity." When you release control at night, libido does not fall into emptiness. It finds other forms in which to continue living through images, symbols, memories, and sensations. And here lies a deeply healing truth you do not need to fear when you feel yourself slowing down. Slowing down is not a loss of energy. Slowing down is energy changing direction. When you allow this to happen, your psyche does what it has known how to do for thousands of years. self-regulate, self-renew, and rediscover a life rhythm that fits. When you lie down, close your eyes and allow consciousness to soften. Libido does not disappear. It begins another journey, a journey inward, refilling what has been depleted and preparing for a new cycle of life. In that silence, nothing is wasted. There is only the quiet work of living energy, allowing you to continue existing not merely as an operating ego, but as a psyche fully alive. And perhaps this is Jung's gentlest reminder of all: do not fear the withdrawal of energy. It is not an ending. It is a necessary return, so that life may continue to flow more deeply, more truthfully, and more humanly, even in sleep. The cycle of progression and regression of the mind, the deep breath of inner life. When we understand that libido never disappears, but only changes direction, a larger law begins to reveal itself, a law that governs the entire movement of the human mind. This life energy does not flow at random. It operates in cycles like breathing tides or the rhythm of day and night. Jung called the two fundamental movements of this cycle progression and regression. Progression is when libido is directed outward. It is the phase in which the mind focuses on the world, on action, adaptation, and becoming a socially functional I. Regression, by contrast, is when energy withdraws inward, turning toward memory symbols, dreams, and the deeper layers of the psyche. What is crucial, and what Jung firmly defended, is that these two movements are not opposed to one another. They complement and nourish each other. In 2 essays on analytical psychology, Jung stated clearly, progression and regression are 2 aspects of the same process. Progression and regression are 2 aspects of the same process. To the modern mind, this sounds paradoxical. We are taught that moving forward is good, stepping back is failure, that activity equals life, and stopping equals stagnation. But Jung viewed the psyche through a deeper biological and symbolic lens. He understood that no living organism can survive through movement in only one direction. A river does not merely flow to the sea. It also requires basins in which to settle. A heartbeat does not only contract, it must also expand in order to continue. Progression for Jung is the necessary movement through which the ego builds identity, learns to act, to love, to work, and to take responsibility. But if progression becomes the only state, the mind will be drained. Libido, when forced to flow outward endlessly, loses its capacity for self-renewal. And it is precisely then that regression appears not as an enemy, but as a natural reflex of life itself. In The Structure and Dynamics of the Psyche, Jung wrote regression is a necessary condition for psychic renewal. Regression is a necessary condition for psychological renewal. Regression in the Jungian spirit is not a return to childishness or an escape from responsibility. It is a purposeful return of psychological energy seeking forgotten sources. When the ego is exhausted, when old strategies no longer work, when the outer world no longer provides meaning, libido naturally finds its way back into the unconscious, where memory archetypes and a wisdom beyond linear reason reside. It is here that many people feel disoriented. They label regression as loss of motivation, depression, or existential crisis. But Jung recognized in it a profound invitation from the psyche. In Modern Man in Search of a Soul, he wrote, "The withdrawal of libido from the outer world is a process of introversion that may lead to a richer inner life. The withdrawal of libido from the outer world is a process of introversion that can lead to a richer inner life." What causes suffering is not regression itself, but the ego's resistance to it. The ego wants to keep progressing, keep controlling, keep being effective. But the psyche needs something else. It needs to be heard, restructured, and allowed to dream. When these needs collide, a person experiences a sense of being lost, not because they are on the wrong path, but because they are between two rhythms of the life cycle. Jung emphasized that every genuine creative process passes through regression. In Psychological Types, he wrote, "Every advance in consciousness is preceded by a regression. Every advance of consciousness is preceded by a regression." This holds true for artists, scientists, spiritual seekers, and ordinary people striving to live meaningful lives. Before something new can be born, the old must withdraw, dissolve, and reorganize. Here, the cycle of progression and regression carries a motivational message very different from the slogan, "Never give up." Jung did not advise giving up. He advised not abandoning yourself when you need to step back. For stepping back, in the language of the psyche, is not failure. It is a quiet preparation for another form of living. Sleep is the purest image of healthy regression. Each night, the ego relinquishes control. Libido withdraws from the world, and the mind returns to its own depths. Jung observed that in dreams, the psyche does not solve problems through daytime logic, but through the language of symbols, a language capable of reconnecting the fragmented parts of the person. In memories, dreams, reflections, Jung wrote, "Dreams are compensatory." Dreams are compensatory. They counterbalance the excesses of consciousness. When you live too strongly in one direction, regression through sleep brings images, emotions, and experiences that restore inner balance. The problem of modern humanity is not a lack of progression, but a lack of space for regression. We fear silence. We fear slowing down. We fear the sensation of doing nothing. Yet Jung reminded us that it is precisely within these empty spaces that libido finds its way back to the source of wisdom. In Ion, he wrote, "The psyche is not a machine that can be driven at will. The psyche is not a machine that can be forced to operate by will alone. It lives according to its own rhythm. When you try to push progression endlessly, you do not strengthen the psyche, you exhaust it. The cycle of progression and regression, therefore, is not something to overcome, but something to respect. When you understand this cycle, you no longer condemn yourself for the urge to withdraw. You recognize that deep fatigue, the longing for solitude, or a sense of emptiness are not signs of failure, but signs of an inner movement taking place. And then naturally, after regression, progression returns, not as a tired repetition, but as a renewed form of living. The ego re-enters the world no longer alone, carrying new insights, images, and energy from the unconscious. Perhaps this is Jung's most deeply healing message. You do not need to live continuously in the light in order to live rightly. You only need to trust the natural breathing of your psyche. When you allow yourself to step back at the right moment, moving forward no longer becomes a struggle, but the natural continuation of a living flow that has been nourished from within. Archetypes, the blueprint of behavior. When we have accepted that the mind operates according to the natural cycles of progression and regression, a deeper question emerges. What shapes the direction of the psyche when it withdraws into the unconscious? If regression is not random chaos, but an ordered movement aimed at restoration and balance, then there must exist fundamental structures quietly guiding the soul through the darkness. Carl Gustav Jung called these structures archetypes. Archetypes, according to Jung, are not specific images learned through culture or education. They are innate patterns of behavior and experience comparable to animal instincts, yet operating within the psychological realm. In the archetypes and the collective unconscious, Jung offered his classic definition. The archetype is a typical form of behavior. Archetypes are typical forms of behavior. They are not ready-made contents, but molds that shape content, like invisible blueprints. Archetypes orient how human beings dream, love, fear, struggle, care, betray, and sacrifice from ancient times to the modern age. The crucial point is this: you do not learn archetypes. You are born with them. They belong to the collective unconscious, the deepest layer of the psyche, where personal memory is no longer central. Giving way to the psychological inheritance of all humanity. Jung described this clearly. The collective unconscious is inherited and consists of pre-existent forms, the archetypes. Because of this inherited nature, archetypes appear in every culture and every era, expressed in countless variations, yet preserving the same core structure. The mother, the hero, the wanderer, the shadow, the trickster, the wise old man, you may call them by different names, but you recognize them instantly. Not because you were taught, but because your psyche already knows. In everyday life, archetypes rarely appear in a naked form. They are activated during pivotal moments when you fall in love for the first time, when you face death, when you must leave behind an old chapter of life, or when you feel betrayed or lost. At such moments, your reaction is often stronger than the objective situation warrants. This intensity is a sign that an archetype has been activated. Jung warned that when archetypes rise without being recognized, individuals are prone to possession. In The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, he wrote, "An archetype can seize a man and use him as its mouthpiece. An archetype can seize a person and speak through them. This is when behavior becomes extreme, irrational, or blindly repetitive. A person believes they are deciding when in fact they are being driven by an ancient script." Yet Jung did not regard archetypes as enemies. On the contrary, he saw them as the deepest sources of meaning and creativity. Without archetypes, the psyche would lose its orientation, like a ship without a map. In Modern Man in Search of a Soul, Jung wrote, "The archetypes are the ultimate foundations of the psyche. Archetypes are the ultimate foundations of the psyche. For this reason, they carry both healing power and destructive potential, depending on whether the ego is conscious of them. During the cycle of regression, when libido withdraws into the unconscious, archetypes often become more vivid. They appear in dreams, in imagination, and in those inexplicable sensations of fate that people struggle to explain. This is not superstition. It is the psyche using its most ancient language to communicate with consciousness." Jung wrote in Memories, Dreams, "Reflections, myths are original revelations of the pre-conscious psyche. Myths are original revelations of the pre-conscious psyche. When you feel drawn to a story, a symbol, or a mythic image, it is often because an archetype is knocking at the door." Here, Jung's motivational message reaches a rare depth. He did not encourage people to escape archetypes. He encouraged them to establish a conscious relationship with them. When you recognize that you are living according to an archetypal script, for example, always playing the role of the sacrificer, the savior, or the rebel, you are no longer unconsciously controlled by that script. you can enter into dialogue with it, question it, and gradually integrate it into a more whole life. Carl Jung wrote, "The archetype is not an inherited idea, but an inherited mode of apprehension." An archetype is not an inherited idea, but an inherited way of apprehending the world. This explains why two people can respond completely differently to the same event they are perceiving through different archetypes. When you understand this, you begin to look at your life with a new gentleness. Your intense reactions are no longer personal failures, but signs of deep psychological forces seeking expression. And instead of condemning yourself, you learn to listen. In the context of sleep, archetypes play a particularly important role. When the ego loosens its grip, archetypes are allowed to appear more directly without being corrected by rational thought. This is why dreams often feel strange, ancient, and richly symbolic. But it is also why sleep becomes a profound space of healing, a place where the psyche can reconnect with its own primordial blueprint. Jung once emphasized, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. The one who looks outward dreams. The one who looks inward awakens." Archetypes do not pull you away from real life. They invite you to enter it more deeply, to live not merely as an individual swept along by circumstances, but as a human being in dialogue with ancient forces that have shaped you for a very long time. And perhaps this is the deepest meaning of archetypes. They do not exist to imprison you in the past, but to guide you through it. When you recognize the blueprints operating within you, you do not lose freedom. You reclaim it by living more consciously, more deeply, and more harmoniously with the greater current of the human psyche that continues to live through you, even in the quietest of dreams. The language of symbols. Nighttime whispers. Once we recognize that archetypes are invisible blueprints shaping human behavior and experience, a natural question follows. How do these ancient forces communicate with consciousness? If archetypes are not concepts to be learned, not commands to be heard, then by what language do they speak to us? Carl Gustav Jung's answer is both simple and profound. The unconscious speaks in symbols, not in logic, not in definitions, not in chains of cause and effect. The unconscious speaks through images, through emotions, through scenes that appear in dreams, in imagination, and in those quiet moments when the ego loosens its grip on control. Jung stated clearly, in Man and His Symbols, the unconscious speaks in symbols. For Jung, a symbol is not a sign that substitutes for a fixed meaning. A sign can be translated directly into a concept. A symbol cannot. A living symbol always carries multiple layers of meaning. and more importantly, it contains something that is still unknown. In Psychological Types, Jung wrote, "A symbol always presupposes that the chosen expression is the best possible description or formulation of a relatively unknown fact. A symbol always assumes that the chosen image is the best possible expression of something that remains relatively unknown. For this reason, a symbol is never exhausted. You may dream of the same image many times throughout your life, yet each time it touches a different emotional layer. Not because the symbol has changed, but because you have changed. The symbol is always larger than consciousness at any given moment." Here, Jung offered a deep critique of modern life. Our consciousness has become impoverished in symbols. We are accustomed to thinking in clear concepts, to measuring, analyzing, and controlling. But the psyche does not operate according to that logic. When consciousness believes only in what can be explained, the unconscious does not disappear. It is merely pushed into the shadows, where it continues to speak through symbols that grow increasingly powerful. In the archetypes and the collective, unconscious, Jung wrote, "The unconscious compensates the one-sidedness of the conscious mind. The unconscious compensates for the one-sidedness of consciousness, and the symbol is the instrument of that compensation. When consciousness becomes rigid, the symbol brings depth. When the ego believes it understands everything, the symbol appears to remind it that much remains unlived. Dreams are the purest space of symbolic language. In dreams, the unconscious does not need to compromise with daytime logic. It constructs strange, irrational scenes, sometimes frightening, sometimes filled with mysterious beauty. Jung emphasized that dreams do not intend to deceive or conceal. In Memories, Dreams Reflections, he wrote, "Dreams are the spontaneous self-portrayals of the unconscious. Dreams are the spontaneous self-presentations of the unconscious. But this is only true if we approach dreams as symbols, rather than as puzzles, to be solved quickly. When we try to translate a symbol into a single meaning, we kill its vitality." Jung strongly warned against mechanical interpretations of symbols. He opposed simplistic dream dictionaries that reduce every image to a fixed definition. In Man and His Symbols, he wrote, "No dream symbol can be separated from the individual who dreams it. No whim symbol can be separated from the person who dreamed it. A symbol is always bound to personal life, to a specific psychological context, and to the developmental stage of the dreamer. Yet this does not mean that symbols are purely personal. On the contrary, their power lies precisely in their ability to connect the personal with the collective. An image in your dream may simultaneously touch a collective archetype. This intersection creates a deep resonance, the feeling that this speaks about me, yet it is larger than me. Jung described this power in symbols of transformation. The symbol is the best possible expression for something unknown. The symbol is the best possible expression of what is still unknown. And because it is unknown, it cannot be confined. A symbol invites you to remain with the question, rather than rushing toward an answer. Here, Jung's motivational message becomes especially gentle. He did not urge people to understand everything. He urged them to allow themselves not to understand within a safe space of images, emotions, and dreams. When you allow a symbol to live within you, it begins to do the healing work that consciousness cannot accomplish. In Modern Man in Search of a Soul, Jung wrote, "Symbols are natural attempts to reconcile the opposites within us." Symbols are natural attempts to reconcile the opposites within us. The fractures of the psyche between reason and emotion, between duty and desire, between the social self and the inner self, cannot be healed by argument. They require another language, one that is softer and deeper. This is why symbols often arrive at night. When the light of consciousness softens, when the voice of the ego grows quieter, the unconscious has a chance to whisper, not in commands, but in images, not to make you act immediately, but to allow something within you to shift. Jung once wrote a very short sentence that carries the weight of a lifetime of research. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. To look outward is to dream. To look inward is to awaken. The language of symbols is the doorway from dreaming to awakening, not the tense awakening of control, but the gentle awakening of inner understanding. When you lie down and close your eyes, the world does not disappear. It changes form. What couldn't speak in words during the day comes to you at night through symbols. And if you do not rush them away, if you do not try to analyze them too quickly, those images will do what they have done throughout human history: enrich the soul, reconnect what has been fragmented, and heal the cracks that consciousness alone cannot reach. Symbols do not ask you to believe. They only invite you to listen. Synchronicity, a non-causal connection. Once we have learned to listen to the language of symbols, the late-night whispers of the unconscious, another more subtle door begins to open. It is not only dreams that speak in images. It is not only the psyche that reflects itself through symbols. At times, the outer world itself seems to respond, not through the familiar chain of cause and effect, but through meaningful coincidences that make us pause, feel unsettled, and sense that something has been arranged. Carl Gustav Jung called this phenomenon synchronicity. Synchronicity is not a miracle in the ordinary sense, nor is it superstition. Jung defined it with great care as a scientist keenly aware of the limits of his discipline. In his essay, Synchronicity and a Causal Connecting Principle, he wrote, "Synchronicity is a causal connecting principle. This means that between your inner psychological state and an external event, there is no direct causal relationship. Yet there exists a connection of meaning. You are thinking about someone from your past, and you suddenly receive a message from them. You are standing at the threshold of an important decision, and you encounter an image, a sentence, or an event that seems to answer the very question quietly burning within you." Jung did not regard such moments as mere chance, nor did he claim they were simple proof of a supernatural force. He saw synchronicity as a sign of a deeper order, one in which psyche and material world are not as completely separate as modern rational thinking assumes. In memories, dreams, reflections, Jung wrote, "It is as if the psyche were a part of the universe and not just something isolated in the skull, as if the psyche were part of the universe itself rather than something sealed off inside the skull." This sentence reveals the deeper foundation of synchronicity. Personal consciousness does not exist in a vacuum. It is immersed in a wider field of meaning where inner and outer movements may intersect. What is important is this synchronicity does not occur all the time. It tends to appear at particular moments when the ego no longer holds absolute control, when a person stands at the threshold of inner transformation. Jung observed that synchronistic phenomena often accompany crises, loss, turning points, or profound awakenings. These are moments when the boundary between consciousness and the unconscious grows thin, and when the separation between the individual and the world becomes more permeable. In the archetypes and the collective unconscious, Jung wrote, "Meaningful coincidences occur in periods of emotional intensity. Meaningful coincidences arise during periods of heightened emotion. When psychological energy is intensified, when libido is being reorganized, the psyche seems to resonate with deeper patterns of reality. This is where synchronicity connects directly with the language of symbols. Symbols are the way the unconscious speaks to consciousness. Synchronicity is the moment when the outer world itself becomes symbolic. An objective event, ordinarily insignificant, suddenly carries subjective weight, as though it has been lit from within. Jung emphasized that the meaning of synchronicity does not reside in the event itself, but in the relationship between the event and the psychological state of the person experiencing it. two people may witness the same coincidence, yet only for one of them does it become synchronicity. In Synchronicity, he wrote, "Synchronicity takes the coincidence of events in space and time as meaning something more than mere chance. Synchronicity treats coincidences in space and time as carrying meaning beyond mere randomness. This brings forth a particularly subtle motivational message. Jung did not advise people to hunt for synchronicities. He warned that obsession with coincidences can lead to delusion. Yet he also did not suggest ignoring such moments. Instead, he invited us to remain with the meaning, to refrain from rushing to explanation or action, and to listen to what is being mirrored. In Modern Man in Search of a Soul, Jung wrote, "The decisive question for man is he related to something infinite or not? The decisive question for a human being is whether or not they are related to something infinite. Synchronicity does not answer this question through theory. It is experienced. In that moment, one senses that life is not merely a chain of random events, but part of an order with depth. Especially at night, when the language of symbols has already opened a path, synchronicity is often felt more strongly, not necessarily through grand events, but through small details. A phrase overheard by chance, a book opening to the exact right page, an image appearing at the precise moment it is needed, not to command you, but to affirm that your inner movement is resonating outward into the world." Jung always maintained a humble attitude toward synchronicity. He never claimed to fully understand its mechanism. In Synchronicity, he acknowledged, "I am only too well aware of how much this realm of experience is shunned by science." He was fully aware that this domain is avoided by science. Yet it is precisely this humility that makes Jung's thought trustworthy. He did not turn synchronicity into an all-explaining doctrine. He kept it as a window, one that opens onto the possibility that reality has more layers than we usually assume. At its deepest level, synchronicity does not ask you to believe in anything new. It only asks you to listen to the relationship between inner and outer life. When you live too far from your own psyche, the world feels meaningless. When you reconnect with your deeper movements, the world begins to respond not in words, but in resonance. Jung once wrote a sentence, both simple and weighty. "We do not know what moves us from within. We do not know what moves us from within." Synchronicity is one of the rare ways that this unknown reaches the surface to remind you that you are not alone in the journey of living. And perhaps this is the deepest healing meaning of synchronicity, not to give you control over the future, not to provide proof for belief, but to restore a sense of connection. In the quiet moments of the late night, when symbols still echo and consciousness has softened, synchronicity, whispers that your life is being held within a web of meaning larger than yourself. Not so that you may understand everything, but so that you no longer feel separate. Individuation, returning to the self. When a person has learned to listen to the language of symbols and begins to recognize moments of synchronicity, those times when the outer world seems to answer a deep inner movement, a new awareness, quiet yet decisive, slowly takes shape. The psyche does not merely react to life. It is moving toward a purpose, not a social purpose, not success or recognition, but a long, inward, silent, and irreplaceable process. Carl Gustav Jung called this process individuation. Individuation does not mean becoming special or different. Jung repeatedly warned against this misunderstanding. Individuation does not separate a person from the world. It allows a person to become whole within the world. In the archetypes and the collective, unconscious, Jung wrote, individuation means becoming a single, homogeneous being, and insofar as individuality embraces our innermost last and incomparable uniqueness, it also implies becoming one's own self. Individuation is becoming a unified, coherent being. And because individuality embraces our deepest and most incomparable uniqueness, it also means becoming oneself. What is essential to understand is this individuation is not an expansion of the ego. On the contrary, it is the process by which the ego learns to relinquish its central position. For much of life, the ego must lead. It learns to adapt to build identity, to protect the person in the world. But at a certain stage, often following crisis loss, or the feeling of living without meaning, the ego realizes that it can no longer remain the supreme commander. Jung described this moment as an unavoidable turning point. The ego discovers itself to be no longer the center of the personality. Aion. At this point, another center gradually reveals itself, the self. The self is not a part of the psyche. It is the totality of the psyche embracing consciousness and the unconscious light and shadow, what has been lived and what has never yet been lived. The self does not speak in commands. It reveals itself through symbols, through dreams, through synchronicity, and through a deep sense that my life is being guided from somewhere deeper. In 2 essays on analytical psychology, Jung wrote, "The self is the totality of the whole psyche. The self is the totality of the entire psyche." Individuation, therefore, is not a journey outward, but a journey back to a deep center that has been present from the beginning, yet obscured by roles, expectations, and the ego's identifications. What makes individuation difficult is not its complexity, but the ego's resistance. the ego fears losing control. It fears that if it lets go, the person will fall apart. But Jung emphasized that the opposite is true. In Psychology and Alchemy, he wrote, "The process of individuation is the natural fulfillment of life. Individuation is the natural fulfillment of life, not an achievement, but the maturation of the psyche. A human life is not fulfilled when all outer goals are reached, but when a living relationship with the self has been established." Here, everything that appeared in the previous sections — personal memory, cryptomnesia, libido, regression, archetypes, symbols, and synchronicity — finds its place. These are not isolated phenomena. They are the tools the psyche uses to guide the ego back to the self. When the ego does not understand, it calls this crisis. When the ego begins to listen, it calls this transformation. Jung once wrote a famous sentence in Memories, Dreams, Reflections: "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." This line is often quoted as a warning, but in the context of individuation, it is also a promise. When the unconscious is made conscious, not through control, but through integration, life no longer feels as though it is being dragged along by blind fate. A person begins to live in cooperation with themselves. Sleep in the Jungian spirit is a miniature image of individuation. Each night, the ego relinquishes power. Consciousness steps back. The unconscious rises. What was split during the day has the chance to meet again in dreams. It is an ancient ritual, repeated nightly, in which the psyche rehearses wholeness. In Man and His Symbols, Jung wrote, "Dreams are the guiding words of the soul." Dreams are the guiding words of the soul, not so that the ego must obey them, but so that the ego may learn to trust that it is not the only one who knows the way. Individuation never fully ends. It is not a destination. It is a way of living, one in which a person no longer identifies with a single role, a single image, or a single story about themselves. Instead, they live with a deep flexibility, knowing that they are an ongoing process. Jung expressed this with a simple yet profound image. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Individuation does not eliminate darkness. It embraces darkness and places it within a larger whole. Then light is no longer fragile, and darkness no longer threatening. And perhaps this is the most complete conclusion to this journey. When you lie down tonight, when consciousness softens and the outer world recedes, you are not leaving yourself behind. You are returning to the current that has always carried you through memory, symbol, coincidence, and silent dreams. Returning to the self, not to become perfect, but to become whole. Not to become someone else, but finally to be yourself fully and peacefully. Your perception is like the beam of a flashlight in a dark room of the psyche. Consciousness shows you only what that beam touches. But memory and the unconscious are the entire structure of the room, vast, deep, and quietly holding you. Tonight, allow that beam to soften, not to disappear, but so that you no longer have to strain to illuminate everything. In that stillness, you are not lost. You dissolve into a complete darkness where every fragment of experience is naturally rearranged into a calm, coherent mandala. Just let go. The rest your psyche has known how to do for a very long time.